again, I'd like to thank everybody for their coming to this conference. That's what makes it a success. Anyway, so the impact of Fabry disease on the family. And when you look at the family, you may have one or two individuals with Fabry disease, but it's the entire family that's affected. It doesn't live in isolation within a certain individual within a family. It affects everybody in some way. And just to give you a little information about myself, I'm from a small farm town in the central United States, Concordia, Missouri. It's a small German farming community, and supposedly the word Concordia, the root means hearts in harmony in German, and therefore the logo that the town has adopted. I'll touch some on my own family. And so this is the family tree that we were able to work up, total of 222 individuals, I believe. And you can see the extent that Fabry has had in our family, and we were able to trace it back accurately 5 generations, and knew within, by death records and family stories and so forth, who was affected in that, and tracing existing relatives to be able to show back that many generations that we did have in certain individuals with Fabry disease. And this blue arrow up here, that's my grandfather. He was the first person in the family to be diagnosed when I was 1. So that was many years ago, which I think gave me a great advantage growing up. My mother saw it in me when I was just 4. I got an official diagnosis when I was 7. So I'm somewhat unusual individual my age to pretty well have known their entire life that they had Fabry disease. Anyway, this is my family. My grandfather over here, the second person from the left. He was the first one diagnosed, and there were 9 children in the family. Of the 5 males, 4 of them were confirmed to have Fabry disease, and of the 4 females, 3 of them were confirmed to have Fabry disease. And this is my, I don't know how many grades back, my grandfather's grandmother, who everyone, the story was in the family, nobody knew what Fabry was before we got the diagnosis, and nobody understood why the men were so sick and all this other kind of stuff. So they actually put it down to a curse from Grandma Meyer, and of course she had to be the source of the problem because she was half Cherokee Indian and wasn't afraid of snakes. And this is the organization that I work with outside of Finn, the Fabry Support and Information Group. We're founded in 1996, and with just a handful of family members and a few names from the National Organization of Rare Disorders, and grew from that to now having over 1,000 members across the United States, and around 1,300 or so with the United States and 42 other foreign countries. So what we've learned about Fabry disease and the family impact is that families around the world are the same everywhere. We all have the same struggles and have the same issues, and you go in and you talk to the individuals, and you see that the impact really is universal in so many regards. And Fabry disease is kind of like having a new dog in the family. It impacts everybody in one way or another. So that's another universal theme that is definitely seen. Individual responses to Fabry disease. We all experience this in our advocacy work out there, and I know there's frustration as a result too with the medical community dealing with Fabry disease, that you have the individuals that we have contact with, the people like us who are the active participants in the Fabry community, they're very proactive. They're worried about their health. They're seeking help and wanting to get better. And those are the ones that we have contact with. And we all know, I have in my own family, and I know from speaking with so many other patients that they suffer the same problems, that you've always got these family members that they just want to stick their head in the sand about it. They don't want to think about it. And they, just don't want to be bothered they want their normal lives to go on and not have to deal with Fabry disease. And that comes down to essentially to denial. And denial is a very powerful emotion. It's a very effective coping mechanism. And though one of the problems, the good side of denial is it's very effective on the short term. But in the long term, it's not. Fortunately, one of the things that is true about individuals, family members, and so forth that may be in denial is they can still hear. It just takes time sometimes for that message to get through and for them to acknowledge it. So we need to be careful about our approaches that we take trying to reach out to these individuals, and this is something for all of our advocacy work that we need to try and do, because we're concerned about these individuals. We want to make sure that they're getting the care that they need and that their additional family members may need. So we need to think about not trying to offend these individuals. This can be a very difficult subject to discuss. It can be a very scary subject to discuss. So we need to be sensitive to the perspective of the various individuals that we may be encountering. And people's views on it vary greatly. They just don't feel that sick, so why do I need to bother with treatment? I don't want to have to deal with this, don't want to think about it. And I've seen this over and over again. I was fine yesterday. I'm feeling okay today. Why should tomorrow be any different? And I had a relative that was like this, and he knew he had Fabry disease and had a significant impact in his life, but he didn't need to get treatment. Well, so he hadn't been able to work for the past 5 years because he was too sick to go to work. But still, he didn't need treatment. And it was shortly after that he went into renal failure, and within 6 months he had passed away. So, it can really catch up with people quickly, and we need to hopefully be able to get through to these individuals. And then we've got the people out there that they just can't accept it. And I know one of my family members, she couldn't accept Fabry disease, and she said there was no such thing as Fabry disease, and you take her to the papers and everything, and no, that can't be it, it's something else. But she just couldn't face the reality of she could have passed something like this on to her children. Her children were perfect, they had no problems, so therefore she couldn't have it, she couldn't pass it on. But we need to talk to these individuals about how it's going to impact their health, how it's going to impact their children's health, because that's a very powerful message, is if this condition is passed on, what it's doing to the additional family members beyond themselves. And it takes time, sometimes for these messages to get through. This is something we tend to see more with the female Fabry population, is the issues of guilt associated with passing the disease on, and that guilt can sometimes be actually a paralyzing block to them being able to have acceptance and move forward with treatment and so forth. And I know we've all seen this in the work that we do. Whenever we're discussing these issues with individuals, it's very helpful to use our own experiences or experiences of others that you may know from your work in pointing out the positive aspects of being able to treat Fabry disease today, and discussing what can happen literally if you do not have treatment, because if it's a classic form of Fabry disease, we know what the outcome is going to be, particularly for males, is pretty much kidney failure at some point in their life if something else doesn't become a major issue first. So these are all important things, and using personal experience and things that have happened to yourself or other family members can be a very powerful message. So, ways that we can kind of get through some of these barriers are support group meetings can be very effective, inviting individuals into this where they can meet others, being able to meet others with similar experiences, and being able to talk with someone that, they feel the same way you do, they know what you're talking about, they understand. That helps break down a lot of the barriers that we form around ourselves, and it helps get through the feelings of loneliness and isolation that so many with Fabry have talked about. And what's a really crucial message for the female patient population is that the women have to acknowledge that they need treatment too, not just their children or their parents and so forth. So we've seen this in the United States quite a bit, where the women just want to make sure their kids get treatment, and they're not worrying about themselves. Well, I'm getting fine. So that's a crucial message as well. What we talk about, the path to diagnosis, that's a very important message too, because different patients have different courses that they went through, have different experiences. For myself, I learned a long time ago, but others may go, as we saw in the previous presentation, 15, 17 years from the time that symptoms first set on to the time that they finally run into a doctor that puts enough of the pieces together to say, hey, I think it's Fabry disease, end up with a correct diagnosis. So those types of messages are very important, and to try and speed that process up for family members. The key is getting that first person in the family diagnosed. That's the hard part. Then it can lead to a cascade of finding those other family members. Discussing the signs and symptoms that you may suffer is very important as well, because then people will see commonality and be able to say, yeah, that sounds like me. I've suffered those same kinds of things. So get them thinking, well, maybe this does need to be checked out. And discussions of how Fabry disease is passed on is crucial when we go in. If we can, talk about the family structure, draw up these family trees and so forth, that is one quick way to be able to point out individuals within a family that may be at risk for Fabry disease, that it makes sense to do testing, and can point out those that don't need to bother with testing. So that's a very useful tool as well in being able to carry out these discussions. And just lastly, we all have to realize that Fabry disease is not a destination, it's a journey, and it changes constantly throughout our lives, and we need to be able to adjust and adapt and make those changes and seek out the help that we need. And for those of us in the advocacy community, we need to listen to ourselves at times, and we need to, our job is trying to help other individuals so much, but sometimes we need to sit back and make sure that we're listening to what we're preaching to a certain degree, and making sure we take care of ourselves and so forth as well. And so tapping into those support systems that we have around us, those family members, the support groups, and the different services and so forth that may be available to the Fabry community are all very key, and we need to share those messages. Anyway, one of the things I wanted to do was, are there anybody out here that has messages that are maybe completely different than what I've gone over here. Or if we could have a show of hands, have many of you seen similar experiences to what we have here, I know, around the room, with issues of denial and so forth. I don't know if there are any different regions where culturally we have barriers to sharing some of these things or not, but I know the messages are the same from my experience and what we've seen around the country. So thank you very much for that. It's very helpful.